Patricia, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me on the Q.A.C. team podcast this afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing quite well, thank you. Thank you for
Awesome.
inviting me.
Absolutely. I am really excited about this because this topic is definitely something that I am big into. And I'm really looking to hear your side and your take of what we're going to talk about today. So let's go and get started and tell our
Okay.
audience more about who you are and what you do.
So I am a business coach and I work with teams and I work with individual business owners to help them develop their leadership skills to think bigger and to, have the right team member in place and, build so they get results.
What a challenge, building teams. I've been there for 20 years, working in corporate America, and it's a challenge. So, why did you decide to be a business owner? Let's talk about that.
So I actually, it was my son who transformed me into this realm. My son, when he was 12, came to me, and my oldest daughter was going to college. My second daughter was about to go to college. And he said, Mom, you don't need to save money for college for me. And I said, oh, really, why? And he said, well, I'm going to be a collegiate athlete. Now, I knew at age 12 how unlikely that was going to be, but I didn't tell him that. I let him believe his little fantasy, as I call it, because you have to also realize he was a type 1 diabetic. So I know the issues with that in playing sports. And so he just kept telling me this over and over for the next 6 years. And then he decided it was going to be baseball. And baseball, they really don't have full scholarships to college. If you're that good, you usually go pro. And the school that was recruiting him, they told us he could expect maybe a third to half. Now, that was an academic scholarship, not a sports scholarship. But when his scholarship letter came, it was a full scholarship. Now, I had done personal development pretty much my entire adult life, which really helped me in my career and as a mom. But when he got that full scholarship, I'm like, how did that happen? And I was excited for him. I was thrilled for him, but I was so angry with me. I'm like, how did he do this? And I've never done anything like that. And so that led me on a journey, and I discovered Bob Proctor. And when I discovered Bob Proctor, it was like this man knows what my son did and can explain it. And so I learned from him. And then I just wanted to share it with others because I knew that, well, I think my son's pretty special. I know anybody can do what he did. And if it's just a matter of following the principles. So I just wanted to share it with the world, really.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about as we transition from, that question into the next one, why did you choose your industry? So tell us a little bit about how, your son got the scholarship and you're like, wow, how can I do that? And you discover Bob Proctor. Let's talk a little bit about this industry, right? Because it's so near and dear to my heart as well. Let's talk about that.
The energy of the business, you mean?
The industry, yeah.
Yeah.
Why you how you chose this industry. Yeah,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
I chose this because it just made sense to work with business owners. I particularly love working with them because you can see results. And you
Yeah.
can see results maybe faster because you're looking at profits than maybe
Mhm.
you can with individuals. So I chose to work with those business owners for that reason. And a lot of business owners, they won't they won't go after what they really want because they go after what they think is realistic. And so they kind of pull one way, but it's not exciting to them. And they maybe don't get their teams excited because they don't really tell the team where they're going. And so that was primarily why I started with the business owners and coaching them and working with them is really to get them to shift their thinking.
Yeah.
Because if you keep thinking the same way, you're going to keep getting the same results. And, you might get a little bit more one year or, the next, but you're not going to make any quantum leaps that way. You really have to start shifting where your thinking is, which will help you shift your behaviors. Because then you have to look at, what are you doing that's maybe keeping you where you are instead of where you'd really like to go.
Yeah,
So it's a matter of,
absolutely.
thinking bigger and then doing the things that will get you to that level. And developing new habits and behaviors and actions. And then you have to look at the people you're working with because, some of my clients would have, certain employees that weren't helping them at all. And, it was like, are you doing yourself a favor by keeping them? Or, would you do both of you a favor by releasing them? Because a lot of times when you release a person that's not really helping you, part of it is because they don't really want to be there,
And
and
releasing a person costs the company more money. They don't realize that
yes.
in the long run, it costs more
Mhm.
money to hire, retrain somebody else. They're losing money, right? And I
Right.
like what you talked about when you first started this question, an answer to this question. What you do is measurable,
Mhm.
and it's kind of like the same what I do. We have KPIs. We can measure things of what we're doing here to show how we can improve and how we're improving and how we're making things better.
Right.
And I love it.
Yeah, because it's all about the results. Businesses,
Absolutely.
everybody wants results,
Yeah.
and so,
Yeah.
when you can see those results coming through, and sometimes it's more subtle, it's more in the person you become, because that's really what goal setting's all about, is
Yeah.
who you become,
Yeah.
from that goal, because you've got to become somebody different to reach those
Yeah.
goals too. And that's
Yeah.
exciting to see the change in
Yeah.
people as well
Yeah.
as in their, bottom line.
Absolutely. And that's what's interesting is like before this business model, I was doing just straight mystery shopping. And it really ties to what you're talking about because everything was measurable, just like it is today with my business. And it's interesting how different owners reacted different to what I was doing, but the employees reacted the same. They were really excited to
Hmm.
see where people stood and how they compared against their other employees, who got the reward this week, who was the one that got shopped. And it was cool to see how they took it serious because you can
Yeah.
actually measure the results and they could see, who was doing better, who needed to improve, and they worked together.
Right. Right.
Powerful,
It
powerful.
is powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So what were some of the challenges that you faced when you started getting into this and realizing what you wanted to do?
So one of my
Starting
biggest
from there.
challenges was I came from the education world. And so in between teaching, and I decided to do about a year and a half, I did corporate training, which, I enjoyed, but I was really doing that to find out what the needs were for business owners so I could make that shift over. And so one of my biggest challenges was, okay, now that I'm doing this, how do I find the clients? Where do I go? And, it's, which is so common with any business. Like, how do you expand your business? How do you grow? And, networking. And be honest, by my nature, I'm pretty much an introvert. And so I couldn't be an introvert if I was going to build a business.
Yeah, that is true. That's a huge hurdle too, right? Because when you're such an introvert, you don't talk to people.
Mhm.
Like you said, it's hard because I started like that. I was the same way. I would, drive up to businesses, sit in my car and drive off because I was afraid to go in and talk to people.
I did that too.
You did that too.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So I mean,
Embarrassed to
it's
say, but yes, I did.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's I look back at it today and I laugh, but back then I was so stressed out, so
Yeah.
worried how I was going to do it. I look back at that today and laugh. It's like, man, it's nothing to walk into a business now and be like, hey, this is who I am and this is what I'm doing. Hey, who
Yeah.
are you? And let's work together. Let's talk. It's so like so natural now.
Yeah, well, and at first you don't know if you can get somebody results. So
Yeah,
that was part of it.
yeah,
But once I could see that I could get people results and get them, really, magnificent results, then you develop more confidence in what you're doing too. And you're on
absolutely.
the right track.
Yeah. So let's talk about Bob Proctor a little bit because, in my when I was introduced to The Secret, the Law of Attraction,
Mhm.
my standout was Dr. Joe Vitale.
Okay.
I really gravitated towards him. He had a great message. He came from the streets and he just fought his way back to the top. And he was somebody that was near and dear to my heart. So let's talk a little bit about how Bob Proctor kind of got stuck to you.
So I think it was just the searching. I'd heard his name, but I never I never came across to many of the conferences or conventions or books. I never heard him. And when you're searching, you find something. And one day I just heard him on the internet, and I'm like, this man knows the answers to the questions I have. And actually, he worked with Joe Vitale. He actually trained him. So, but
That's
it
awesome.
was just something that really clicked with me in what the way he was explaining how the mind worked. And I had done what I would just call very conventional personal development prior to that, and never anything with the law of attraction. I never heard of the law of attraction. And actually I'd never seen this secret until after I'd known Bob for a while and he kept talking about it. And I was like, I got to get this movie and watch it. I'd never heard of that movie either. And
Right.
it was just so different. And I was like, this is the piece I'm missing because
Yeah.
when I could see how it all tied together, I could go back to my son and I said, let me explain what you did.
Right.
He
Yep.
basically followed all those laws of attraction. He didn't know he was doing it. Just this is what he did. He kept thinking about that goal and kept, reinforcing it. And it came to him. And wasn't supposed to happen. I mean, it was just so bizarre. And, once you understand how the laws work, then you can look at it and say, oh, well, that's how it happened.
Yeah. I think the hardest part that I struggle with and still struggle today with, it's very simple. And when I talk to people about it, it's ask, believe, receive. It's very simple.
Hmm.
Asking's not hard. Believing is hard. And then receiving, well, if you don't believe, you're not going to receive.
Right.
And it's a struggle daily. I have great days. There's days where I'm like, what am I doing with my life? And
Hmm.
and I think, what you're doing can really help businesses and people really see that stick with it, you can get results, right? Let's talk about that a little
Right.
bit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you really do have to stick with it. And it's easy to stop believing because an obstacle gets in the way, disappointment comes, and you
yeah,
think, okay, then it's not going to happen. Well,
right,
you can't be believing in something and thinking it's not going to happen at the same time. You know,
right.
it's got to go one way or the other. So you really have to keep your thoughts, when that disappointment happens. I always say, maybe there's something else better. And I mean, that's what happened to my son. It didn't go straight, right to the goal. He had a lot of disappointments along the way, but it was okay. So maybe this isn't the right road. And so I think that's what you have to start looking at when something doesn't work out the way you're expecting, it's because you don't know all the answers. And
Yeah,
if you'd have gone that path, you wouldn't have gotten it. So now you have to look for the next path. And, that's exactly what happened to my son. If he'd have gotten the way he thought he had to plan to get that scholarship, it would have never happened. He might have
yeah,
gotten that half or third, but because he had disappointments and just kept moving, that opportunities came. And so we have to look differently at our disappointments and discouragements and look at them as there's an opportunity coming and just keep believing.
yeah,
And you're right,
yeah,
it's difficult because you look
yeah,
at the reality around you and you have
yeah.
to think what you want instead of looking at your reality.
And I think that's something that the law of attraction has taught me and millions of other people is that our minds are wired to be in that fight mode. You're
Hmm.
not wired to really just be open and let's just go for the gold. You're wired to protect yourself. And once you can realize to get over that, right? And say, look, I have to fight through this fear. I got to fight through these when I wake up and I don't want to do it today, fight through that to get to that other side of success, right? Because that's how we're wired, right?
Right. Right. And there's a great article called The Common Denominator of Success. And in that article, it talks about, successful people, they do things that they call them failures. I like to call them unsuccessful people, don't like to do. And it's not that they like doing those things, it's they're looking at the results. So you have to keep focused on where your result is. And, is that result big enough for you to go after. Because that's the other thing. A lot of times people set the wrong kind of goal. They don't set a goal that they
Yeah.
really, really want. They set one they think they can get. And
Yeah.
there's no excitement there. So you really
Yeah.
have to start with setting that goal that, you don't know how you're going to get it because how doesn't matter. You just need to know what you want and then start being open to the opportunities and being willing to shift yourself because you're going to have to become a different person in order to
Yeah.
accomplish that goals. I mean, the person I am today is not the person that drove around that business and never stopped my car. I just drove right
Never.
by, you know. So I'm
Right.
not the same person today, and
Yeah.
you can't be if you're going to accomplish those goals.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you talk about that because you're looking at a guy, right? I have some humongous goals. I am laser focused on what I want, where I want to go, how I want to do it.
Hmm.
But my problem is, I'm asking and I'm believing. I can't wait to receive. I am so passionate about what I do. I want it today. I can't wait tomorrow. I can't wait next week. I want it now. And I think that's millions of Americans are the same way. Millions of people around the
Hmm.
world are the same way to where we want it right now. And we have to know to take a step back and just let the cards fall, let things go, and recognize where you're headed in your path, right?
Right.
Because, I have shifted, oh my God, 7 times since I started the second business. My business model has changed, but I finally got it. I just opened myself up and relaxed and let things fall. And I finally got it. I now I know where I'm at and what I want to do,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah, and it takes some time.
Yeah, it does.
Sometimes, and you can have that goal, but just like everything has a gestation period, and you don't know how long it's going to take you, and you don't know
Yeah,
what you need to learn.
yeah,
For myself, looking at building my business, I needed to learn some things first.
yeah,
And so it was
yeah,
difficult and there were challenges because I didn't know what I didn't know.
yeah,
And so even though I had that goal and the dream, it wasn't coming because there were steps I was missing and I had to
yeah,
go through that. And I think
yeah.
that's the other thing. I even think back into my teaching career. There were difficult times that I went through, and at the time, you don't enjoy it, and you're thinking, why do I have to go through this? And why is this challenge here for me? But you know what? On the other side of it, when you see that you had to learn something and you
I
maybe
asked
didn't
myself
realize you
that
had to learn
question.
something. And when you get to the
Yeah.
other side, I mean, there are times I'll go, I would do that again for the growth that I had in myself.
I ask that question to myself every day. Why am I going through this?
Yeah.
What am I missing? Why am I doing this? Can I
Hmm.
just get past this? And I know I'm missing the forest through the trees. That's the famous analogy.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know the answer's there. I'm not taking a step back and really analyzing how to get past this sticky point. And I'll get there. I'll figure that's just part of
Hmm.
growth, right? You know,
Right. It
and that's
is.
something you teach, right? That's part of what you
It
teach, right?
is. And
Yeah.
we live in this instantaneous world, and
Yeah.
so often, we just think it should happen right away. And
Right.
we don't realize that there are things you probably have to go through before you
Yeah.
get there. But you have to keep in mind what Napoleon Hill said in Think and Grow Rich, that when the big money comes, it's like flowing like a river, and you wonder where it's been all those years.
All those years. Yeah. That's what Dr. Jay Vitale talks about. The money's out there. It's there. You just have
Hmm.
to find it. You have to
Yeah.
be open to it to flow because you have to give to get. And people don't realize that. People, they think that it's all about me, 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 me.
Hmm.
Why me? Why not for me? But you have to realize you have to give to get. It's a flowing thing, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So who was your perfect client? Who do you serve as just small businesses? Is it anybody, big corporations? Who do you look to be your perfect client?
My perfect client is a small business owner. And the small business owner that maybe has reached a certain plateau and they just can't seem to get beyond that. And they know what they want to do, but they just can't figure out where to go. Those are the ones I most enjoy working with because, like I said, you see the results. So yeah, those are my most ideal clients or those that have a team. And I love working with teams also because, if you have you have a team that's pulling in different directions, you're not going to get the results. So, how do you get a team to move forward together so that maybe that business owner doesn't have to babysit the team all the time and putting out fires all the time? How do you get those people to work together? So, I love working with the different personalities. I do disc profiles and I do 5 behaviors of cohesive teams to really figure out, do assessments to figure out where a team is and then where they could go best, and who maybe is best to keep people accountable, and to realize that sometimes conflict is something you need to talk about and figure out, and how can you get that team to really work well
Wow.
together.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've done that for 16 years for a big corporation, and I loved every minute of it. It was a lot of fun. It was a challenge, and I loved that challenge of getting into people's minds. What makes you tick?
Hmm.
What makes the team tick? How do we get these folks to work together? You got 15 to 30 people that all have different personalities, and you got to figure out to make it work. It's definitely a challenge, and it's fun, isn't it?
It is fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are your expectations for you and your business the next year or two? What are you hoping
So
to
in
get
the
to?
next year or two, I've actually started partnering with a gentleman, actually in England, and we're working on this program, which we're actually helping businesses do things for them, if they need. He's got an agency, so I'm using kind of my skill, and we're using his agency to help businesses to really thrive and to grow quickly. So I'm actually partnering with him as well as, keeping my side of the business too with working with individuals and teams.
That's great. So you're actually around the world, not just in the US.
Yes, although a lot of his business happens to be in the US, so
Yeah.
yeah,
That's great. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that was my next question. The final question here was going to be, how do we reach out to you? How do we contact you? And how do we find you?
Yeah, you find me at creatingtopproducers.com, is my website, and you can reach out to me through LinkedIn, primarily, usually LinkedIn or Facebook.
Facebook too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I just realized that I should be utilizing LinkedIn a lot more since I am B2B myself, and I tend to put that up to the side because I was really focused on Instagram and Facebook. Never
Hmm.
realized the power of LinkedIn. So I've been trying to get more active on LinkedIn. So I think I'll find you and
Yeah.
I'll request you on LinkedIn so we can hook up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like LinkedIn. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good platform. When it first came out, I didn't understand it much and just I didn't do much, but now it's really they found their niche and I think it's a
Mhm.
good platform. It really is.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Patricia, thanks for coming on and sharing your story with me. Final thoughts before we close out here.
I just think people need to realize that you can never outperform the image you hold of yourself. So if you want to move forward, you have to change your self-image.
That's awesome. Good stuff. Appreciate you. Patricia, again,
Thank
thanks for
you.
coming on. Love the story. Thanks for sharing. And we'll connect soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Have a great rest of the day. Okay. Have a
You
great
too.
weekend. Thank
You
you so
too.
much. Take care.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Q.A.C. Team podcast with your host, Charles Luttrell. Connect with us on the web at QACteam.com, TikTok at Q.A.C. Team, Facebook and Instagram at QAC.team. Thanks for your support.